this right. Hello, welcome to Sondersisterhood. Sisterhood. It is Saturday night, July 5th, and thought I would do the fourth night of our book club, The Courage to Be Disliked. We're going to talk about the fourth night for the chapter, and yeah, we before we get into that, we have been kind of just hanging out and laying low today. It is 4th of July weekend, and I can already hear people in my neighborhood continuing to do the whole fireworks bit. So hopefully homeboy back here stays chill for the duration of the live. He also unfortunately has a UTI, so he's just super uncomfortable and restless, but he's just now starting to calm down. So we have had a little bit of a stressful weekend. I say that because this book is a little bit dense and requires a lot of, at least for me, some brain power to kind of talk through on these lives. So hopefully I'll be able to stay kind of coherent and continue to make sense through the live tonight. But yeah, so the majority of the fourth night is really talking about communities. So in this section of the book, the youth voice in the book kind of challenges the philosopher in terms of, you talk about separating tasks and that people need to focus on themselves and what their tasks are, and not take on other people's things and own their own stuff. And he really sort of challenges the philosopher in terms of, but that just leaves us all as a bunch of individuals. And it implies that one person's life isn't impacting mine and that it's not this mutual give and take. Whereas what we know is that the philosopher, or the Adlerian philosophy, is that by making sure you're focusing on your tasks, it actually leaves you more open to be able to be there for other people and create more of a level playing field. And this night of the chapter, he talks about creating horizontal relationships versus vertical relationships. So as we move into the book, further along into the chapter, let me go back to where I had some things written. He really talks about, so what is the goal of interpersonal relationships? And again, according to Adler, most conflict, most distress, the root of that is interpersonal relationship, right? So we're either in competition with somebody, we're in what they're calling vertical relationship with somebody, where we're judging or someone's judging us. It's more of a top down, and really talks about that is the root of distress, root of disharmony. And what the philosopher will say is the goal of interpersonal relationship is actually the community feeling. So most of us, in order for us to be in harmony, for us to feel stable, for lack of a better word, the goal is to be in community, which on the surface makes sense, right? Especially when you talk about human beings being a communal species. And most of us want to feel seen and heard. And feeling seen and heard helps us maybe increase our vulnerability, get to know other people more, live more in being more comrades with people. And here's something else that the philosopher says, and it's, to be sure, that is the kind of image that generally comes to mind when thinking of self-centered people, in terms of only thinking about yourself, your own tasks, and not other people's tasks. This is what he's responding to. But there is another type that must be taken into account. People who are incapable of carrying out the separation of tasks and who are obsessed with desire of recognition are also extremely self-centered. So what he talks about is it's okay to separate your tasks. It's okay to just focus on your tasks. What the philosopher is saying here is when you're not doing that, you're just as self-centered because your motivation around doing that is about getting something from somebody else. So he kind of flips it a little bit, which I thought was interesting, right? Like, couple that with the idea that you can separate your tasks, focus on yourself, and by focusing on what you can control and what you're responsible for, it actually allows you to give more of yourself to somebody else because it diminishes that feeling of, well, what are they going to think of me? Are they going to like me? So again, he just emphasizes a way of living in which one is constantly troubled by how one is seen by others is a self-centered lifestyle. And I think that's a good call out. I do think most people think when they're putting others first, when they are focusing on the needs of others first, we tend to think of that as the opposite of selfishness. And what the Adlerian philosophy would say, that's actually quite self-centered because your motivation to do that is self-fulfilling. When you're constantly doing that in that way, you're likely feeding something within you that needs to be fed versus, hey, this person needs help and I'm going to help them. It's usually something of this is what it feels. It feels good to me to help somebody because then somebody feels needed or then I feel needed. So it takes it just that step further, which I think is interesting. I also think, again, if you're somebody who's like, well, I can't just focus on my own tasks because how selfish is that? Well, actually, when you're engaging in help with somebody else solely to fill something that's a void or empty within you, maybe that's not so altruistic after all, right? And he calls that making the switch from attachment to self to concern for others as well. All right, so again, really emphasizing the importance of community and why community is important. He talks about feeling that one has one's own place of refuge within the community, feeling that it's okay to be here, and having a sense of belonging. These are basic human desires. Essentially, what he's saying is we all need that safe space. We all need that soft place to land. I think it's one of the reasons why this channel was started, right? Is because for example, for this channel, those who are single and childless, not by choice, there's not a lot of community places where you're feeling like it's a soft place to land with these two really vulnerable scenarios. And so community, when it's working really well, is a soft place to land. And he goes on to say, in Adlerian psychology, a sense of belonging is something that one can attain only by making an active commitment to the community of one's own accord, and not simply by being here. By making an active commitment, what does one do exactly, right? And it's not, he goes on to talk about a commitment to community is one needs to think not what will this person give me, but rather what can I give to this person? And so it's leading with your values. It's what can I contribute? What can I bring versus what can I get from somebody else? And when you're engaging in community where even when you're at your worst, even when you feel like you're in a really vulnerable spot and very, maybe at your, in an emotionally difficult place, you still have something to contribute to somebody else. which I think is valuable to remember. All right. He also really talks about less of it being like a label that brings about community, but more about um, the larger community. So, uh, so he talks about like the broad community being essentially maybe like the humanness of community versus these smaller communities that people can latch onto. So when I was reading this aspect of the night in the story, I thought about it in terms of when we recognize we're not going to, I'll speak from the female perspective, when we recognize that we're not going to be a mother, we're automatically in our head sort of pushed out of, not able to enter into the community of motherhood, for example. And that feels like a very important community to be a part of when you want to have kids, right? And because we often think of community as these smaller, I believe he even uses the word smaller communities, as these labeled communities, it can feel like when we don't have access to that, then we're out of community. I think those of us who are childless not by choice potentially have felt that way before, right? Like, I don't have access to this community of being a mom. And so I'm feeling very isolated and like I don't have community. And what Adler really emphasizes is that it's not about all of these smaller kind of sideload communities, but it's about these this one large community. There are 450 children in foster care in any given day, and as many as 700,000 adopt! Exclamation point. I don't want to adopt. Thank you. And really kind of talks about this larger world that we are a part of, and that the community isn't, again, these silos, but our community is this large community. And that even though we have, and we all have our own experiences that we can bring to the community and learn from. Then I don't want kids. Okay, that's great. I just don't have time for this tonight. I don't have time for people telling me how I feel about something. I get to choose how I identify. And I don't want to adopt. And not that I have to say this, but I'm going to, is that not anyone can just adopt. It can be expensive to adopt, even in foster care. It can also mean not a lot of single women of a certain age are able to adopt either. So think about that before you go and intrude in somebody else's life about something where they're just trying to spread positivity and be an encouragement and be a support from others. You just said you feel left out because you don't have kids. I didn't say it. Yeah, there is a certain community that I'm not in, and that some people can feel left out when they're not in that community. Again, when we're talking about the community as a whole, once you know how big the world is, you will see that all the hardship you went through in sort of this small community was a storm in a teacup. And I underlined this a lot because I actually love this metaphor, a storm in a teacup. So for example, if you want kids or you wanted kids and you don't, you might feel like, in terms of your group of friends who are moms, you might feel like you're kind of this storm because you don't have kids in this teacup, and the teacup being sort of this smaller silo of a community, right? And the moment you leave the teacup, that raging storm will be gone and a gentle breeze will greet you in its place. Really talking about expand beyond the teacup, expand beyond the communities that you think are the only ones available to you. I've raised 10 foster children because they live lives too very rewarding. I love that you did that. I actually really appreciate that you do that, because it's not something that I feel called to do, probably in the same way that you do. I'm a social worker by trade. I know how hard that is to do that. And so, Benny, I really appreciate you doing that, because you're right. People, there are a lot of kids out there who need homes, and people who feel like they're in the mental space and capacity to do that in a really way in which they're present around that. So I'm glad that there are people like you who do that, because it's not something that I think, because not having kids for me has been such a grief process, I don't know that I would show up as my best self in that situation. So I'm glad that you're there to do that. And at the end of this kind of mini chapter within this night, he says, do not cling to the small community right in front of you. There will always be more you and I and more everyone and larger communities that exist, which I think is a really good takeaway. Is if you're feeling like you're not belonging, if you're feeling like there's something about you that you're not able to access a certain community, think larger, think bigger. They're not my words, actually. I am looking at the book, The Courage to Be Disliked, which is like kind of thinking about how can you think about things in a way in which you really have the courage to live in your truth and live your life, because many of us, it's feels really scary to focus on ourselves and do the things that we feel like are right for us because we have so many other influences that are impacting us. All right, so now we're going to move into this concept of horizontal relationships, and there's a joke to be made there. I think when we talk about that, but I will skip it. And it says, how does carrying out the separating of tasks connect with good relations? And this is to say, how does it connect with building the kind of relations in which we cooperate and act in harmony with each other, which brings us to the concept horizontal relationships. And they talk about horizontal relationships and that it's essentially a level a playing field. And yeah, I actually think a lot of it is be yourself. And I like that, Jeannie, too. I just heard a song from the movie Aladdin, like the one from the 90s on TikTok. And it just like brought a whole bunch of childhood memories back. But when we're able to be in, quote, horizontal relationships where we're not in that relationship because we want something from somebody or we need some type of acknowledgement from somebody or we need something, yes, soundtrack, thank you, then we're able to be more peace and harmony with ourselves, right? And able to, instead of focusing on, I'm doing something because of what I need from somebody else, instead, we're doing something because it serves a better purpose and it serves what I need. And really talks about in horizontal relationships, people are generally seeking praise or receiving, not horizontal. In vertical relationships, people are generally seeking praise or giving praise or seeking judgment or giving judgment. Meaning when we're in relationship with somebody that we need praise around or we are encouraging them to do things through praise or through judgment, and that's how we get people to see things our way, that is inherently not a relationship that both people are going to be fulfilled around. That relationships where there's encouragement, which seems really simple, but he really extends this to all types of relationships, even when they're relationships in which historically we consider them to have like power dynamics around. Fair call not fostering kids if you're not in the right headspace. You can feel left out in a group of friends who have children if your own children have left home. You know what, Jesse? Having foster children just so you don't feel left out is not the best reason to foster. Yeah, I think, and to kind of connect it back to what we're talking about here, it's the idea of doing something because you're trying to fill something within you, whether that's, and filling something with you in a manner of trying to prevent a negative feeling. Like, I want to be able to be a part of this community, so I'm going to have kids maybe in a way in which I wouldn't typically want to do that. Or you're doing it because you think like it's expected. I'm not saying that's why all people, I think people have a very strong conviction and testimony to foster children or adopt children. I just don't have that. And I'm really thankful there are people out there who do. But I think that doing something, you have to, it really considering why you're going to do something. You know, I don't want to be a parent outside of the way that I always imagine myself being a parent because the grief is too difficult, if that makes sense. Like, I'd rather manage and deal with the grief and then find these other community, like to find the larger community for me to connect to. If that makes sense. Like, that's where Adler would say, well, connect with this broader community. And so that's what I'm trying to do, is connect with something beyond what I don't have, but connect with what I do bring. Because I have lots of things to bring. We all have lots of things to bring. And again, he just emphasizes horizontal relationships are equal but not the same, right? For all people, there will no longer be any room for inferiority complexes to emerge, is what he's saying. What I really like about this chapter is the youth really pushes back to challenge the philosopher in this, because it is a little tricky and it's even harder to explain when you're talking about, I'm not going to take on somebody's tasks, while simultaneously talking about engaging community and being there within community. Because those two things are not the same. And he would say being in community is about bringing your true self forward versus that self that you're just trying to seek something from somebody else or fulfill something in you from somebody else. He really emphasizes, and I've talked about this in the other book clubs around this, this is what I really like about this book and the Adler and psychology, is he emphasizes you don't have to wait for other people to change to feel better. You have the autonomy, you have the power within you, and changing how you frame things and think about things, and challenging yourself and the whys behind you do things is the steps to do that. So here's another quote. This is on 186. When receiving praise becomes one's goal, one is choosing a way of living that is in line with another person's system of values. So I underlined this because I think we do that all the time. That we choose to do things because we're influenced to do it. And we may really want to do those things, but I'm sure there are things that maybe you don't want to do. I think one of the big examples which may seem a little, I don't know. It's just one that comes to mind, but I know it's not a perfect example. Is like going to college, right? Like we're all kind of fed this idea that going to college is the right thing to do. And many people did that, but a lot of people kind of did that because it was somebody else's value system, right? That they were taking on. I think some people did it for like fear or feeling like that was the pathway and the only pathway to success, which it's not. Okay, I underlined quite a bit, but I'm moving through here. Okay, so if one is building horizontal relationships, which is relationships that are more on an equal playing field, not vertical relationships where it's kind of top down, there will be words of more straightforward gratitude and respect and joy. Well, we all want that, I think. And so here is his pushback related to praise. I would love to feel, sometimes when I look at the chat, I'll see a word and then it gets stuck in my head. But I would love to hear what you guys think about this. So being praised essentially means that one is receiving judgment from another person as, quote, good. And the measure of what is good or bad about that fact is that person's yardstick. The person who's giving you the praise has now owned what is good and bad, right? If receiving praise is what one is after, one will have no choice but to adapt to that person's yardstick and put the brakes on one's own freedom. Thank you, on the other hand, rather than being judgment, is a clear expression of gratitude. When one hears words of gratitude, one knows that one has made a contribution to another being. So again, he talks about it in terms of what you can contribute and sort of that being the driver versus your motivation being praised. Because if your motivation is praise, then you will morph and adapt yourself to meet somebody else's yardstick. And then in those cases, we better hope that their yardstick is decent, right? So I think about it probably, that would be like a good thing to journal around if you're a journaler. It is when one is able to feel I am beneficial to the community that one can have a true sense of one's worth. Yeah, so now what can I get from the community? But I'm a part of the community. I am of use to someone. I think there's a lot of like science and data that really talks about kind of the happiest people are those that feel like they're contributing. Like as humans, we are part of we're a communal species, and contributing is actually really important for ongoing quote unquote happiness. I'm sure there's exceptions to that. Yeah, so he says, instead of thinking of oneself on the level of acts, meaning what can I do to elicit praise, first of all, one accepts oneself on the level of being. I am being, and just being is contributing. So the example he gives in this book is, even if you don't feel like you're able to contribute through tasks or actions, just your being is really valuable for somebody. And then he just talks about the youth in the book kind of pushes back, like, this is really idealized. Like, how realistic is all of this, right? And the philosopher, and he's just like, well, somebody has to be the start. Somebody has to do it. And straight up said, my advice is that you start. And I think we sometimes get caught up in like, well, why am I doing this when nobody else is? Well, do it. You have nothing to lose. That's where my brain is going. Um, yeah, I thought that, Jesse, I thought the dialogue in the book around praise was really interesting. And again, one that I think makes sense to explore even more. Like, I know when someone tells me good job, especially at work, I feel really good. Like, that feels good, that feels motivating. It makes me want to like continue more. But yeah, it's essentially the person who told me good job, it's a good job based on their yardstick, right? Like, that may not be what I consider a good job at work. And so maybe I need to consider what a good job at work is versus trying to elicit praise from the boss, for example. And maybe, I mean, maybe that's why I'm not feeling super fulfilled at work right now, quite honestly. Instead, I feel a ton of stress. So I got a little touchy with Benny, and I didn't mean to be, Benny. I'm sorry. Is because I'm carrying a ton of stress, right? In this other area. And maybe it's because I'm my where I would feel fulfilled is not in alignment with where, if I want praise, that's where I would need to go. And I'm somebody who likes praise, right? I like to be told good job. It makes me feel valued. It's where, unfortunately, it's where I get a lot of self-worth from, because I am single and I don't have kids. And so I at my worst, I feel a certain kind of way around that, shame and embarrassment around that, and sort of what others may think about me when they learn that about me. And again, all of that is someone else's yardstick. And so what Adler would tell me is, Carrie, you got to start managing and thinking about what your own tasks are. Okay. Yeah, I can feel my voice is pretty pressured. I was thinking that earlier. My dog has a UTI, and it's 4th of July here, so we had tons of fireworks. It's been a couple of days, I will tell you. So yeah, that is essentially kind of the roundup of the fourth night, talking about what is community, maybe reconceptualizing community. I think we often think about community as certain populations of people based on identity. And if you're in this world and you're feeling like, I'm not sure which community I fit into, he would challenge you, expand out. Your very existence is you are a part of the large community. And then also, like some of you are saying, that talk around trying to have as many horizontal relationships in our life versus vertical ones where we're seeking something from somebody, or the responsibility is on us to praise somebody else, for lack of a better word. Those aren't going to be fulfilling, right? We're not going to get that other person's true sense coming at us, and when we're the ones giving the praise. And then when we're seeking praise, it's somebody else's yardstick. And when we're misaligned in our values, there's a concept, acceptance and commitment therapy. When we are misaligned, when our values are different than how we're living, that's when stress, anxiety, low mood, a lot of those things come up. Now, obviously, there is like some data that talks about there being like certain chemical imbalances and actual physiological pieces as well. But there's also more of the kind of psychosocial pieces of it, right? And that's when we're living out of alignment from our values. Better than giving praise to another is to express specific observations about another that they do that are helpful or appreciated. Yes, and that's exactly what he talks about, is giving encouragement, saying thank you, recognizing what somebody has done without attributing a value, for example, to it. And he talks about this in terms of parenting, actually. And, we often use praise or judgment to influence behavior in children. And he would say, encouraging children helps kids then develop it more internally and develop their own internal compass toward that. I'm obviously not a parent. That sounds really difficult because I do think there are certain things, right, that like maybe safety stuff, right, that somebody's just, we don't have time to sort of help them grow into it, but they got to know right away. So yeah, we've made it through the fourth night of the book, The Courage to Be Disliked. I don't like praise much. I prefer to know how my actions have helped somebody else. Yeah, it's like more genuine that way, right? Adler might even say, why do you feel the need to help somebody else? He really goes there, right? He really goes there. If you're helping somebody else strictly to get the knowledge from somebody that you have, then you're seeking something out in that way. I also think, again, that's part of human nature in terms of the symbiotic relationship of people, which is what the youth pushes back on quite a bit. Like, hey, part of relationship is this like mutual give and take, right? But yeah, he's got an answer for everything. I would think it's real, when you're like in school, like to be a therapist or things like that, they talk about all these different types of modalities. And it's really hard to be a purist in terms of one modality, because people bring so many different things into the space that a lot of people mix and match. But this is the truest. I will tell you, if you have not read this book, I do think it's worth reading. And it's one of those books where it can be a little bit heavy. So even just reading a few pages a day. So I'm reading this book as a nonfiction book right now. And then I'm reading a fiction book. It's a Funny Story by Emily Henry. So it kind of helps offset it a little bit. So we have one more night left for our book club. And the fifth night is to live in earnest in the here and now. I probably need to read this book, this chapter a few times. Being able to live in the here and now would be really great. If I could figure out how to do that mentally, I think would be really great. I think for a lot of us, we live in the past. In terms of, the old adage is kind of like when your thoughts go to the past, it's often when that'll elicit more like low mood. And when our thoughts go to the future, that's when we can elicit some more anxious thoughts. And so living in the here and now, theoretically, can bring us more peaceful thoughts, because ultimately the here and now is what we can control. Oh, thank you. Thank you regarding the dimples. Yeah, so what are we going to do tonight? I think Gavin's on his, I think the gabapentin might have kicked in for my boy here. Oh, if those of you who are later, he has a UTI. So he's on antibiotics and some gabapentin. I really like the sound of the book you're reading. I made a note for it. Yeah, so it's a pretty popular book, even though it's kind of dense. More than 10 million copies sold worldwide. So it's possible I'm actually late to it. But when I was in the bookstore, the title grabbed me. And I think it's true. It takes guts to consider, to really put the framework of you versus the framework of others first. So it's interesting. He is a cutie. He knows he's a cutie. I know he's a cutie. Yeah. All right. At the spotted blanket. Nope, it's just my spotted boy. It's a Merle pattern is what they call it. He's a Great Dane. First dog I've ever had, and he's just the best. So, but he is a little sloshed right now because of the gabapentin and the pain meds. So I will look to do the 5th night next week, and then we have our next book, which is it's a book that's similar. It's I think it's called F It, How to Be at Peace with Your Life Just As It Is. Who doesn't want that, right? And that is July 19th. I'm going to do a live at noon Eastern time to talk about that book. But I got to haul and finish this book so I can read them all. Let me know if you have any other suggestions for books. I would love some fiction books that we could read in the back end of the year, since we have a lot of these fiction books now. And also, we've had some requests for movies, and the movie Up has been requested. And so I'm trying to figure out a month to do that one too. I have a cane corso. Oh, so you know all about the big dogs then. A cane corso Italian Mastiff. That's a big, big boy. There's a cane corso that comes to the park that we go to, and he's just a big old, like, cuddle bug. He just loves to go say hi to everybody. So, all right. It's good to see everybody. I hope you have a great rest of your weekend, and would love to hear your thoughts. I will see you next time. Bye, guys. 200 pounds and run to the litter. Oh, God, that's so funny. Bye. Good to see you, Jessie.